Welcome to MOTS, where we'll be applying the Manzer or mostly Thurlow scale of quantitative analysis of pop culture narrative through a binary system.
MOTS!
This podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome to Bon Motz's review of Spider-Man Homecoming. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Rich Perry, Louis Duran,
Hello.
and Chris Morgan.
Good evening.
So, I'm going to give the funny logline. Like John Lennon said, a working-class villain is something to be. Now, Rich, we're on to you with the brief synopsis of this film.
All right, Spider-Man's really trying to find his footing in the world and trying to become an Avenger. He's having a tough time because Tony Stark thinks he should keep his nose to the ground and really live his life. And he comes in his attempt to prove himself, ends up coming across a plot of black market stealers that are like stealing the tech from the battles of the Avengers. They get into it. He eventually wins and gains respect in Tony Stark, Happy Hogan's, and everyone's eyes, only at the expense of his personal life.
Like every Spider-Man, or at least what Spider-Man should be.
Yeah.
So, Louis, would you like to start with the introduction?
So movie starts 8 years prior to the start of the the Spider-Man arc. We're introduced to Adrian Toomes. He runs kind of like a construction, liquidating, rubble clearing company, and he kind of lands a big contract after the battle in New York. Where the Avengers and Chitauri just laid waste to a lot of buildings. Halfway through his contract, I would imagine, damage control comes in and they say that they need to leave. All the rubble and everything has to be turned over. It's all being kind of subcontracted by the government now. And we've come to find out it's Tony Stark. So out of a job, we're kind of see a little bit of Adrian Toomes, who is later going to be the Vulture. Kind of out of his wits, doesn't know what to do. But 8 years later, we are kind of pushed into Civil War. Shortly after Civil War, Spider-Man's brought in. He does his little film documentary. Fast forward, Tony's impressed with what he did, gives him a new suit, and say from there, we are brought back to Vulture's whereabouts. He's kind of leading a gang now, selling weapons that were kind of remanufactured from the Chitauri invasion to modernize. I guess it was a mix of our technology and their technology. Mm-hmm. I'd say that kind of speeds it up to Spider-Man getting a new suit, trying it out, him trying to balance high school life and his hero life, up until one point where I guess Vulture's arc and Spider-Man's arc intersect at the ATM, where he tries to stop robbers that have advanced weapons, and everything kind of changes from there.
Go on. Okay. I was going to say, because everything's in like Peter Parker's POV, like he's shooting it on his phone or whatever. And I like the introduction to him in Berlin is Underoos. And he's like, all right, I'll be right back. And he goes and takes the shield from Captain America.
This is, basically my commentary is going to span both the introduction and the body for how I view this film. It does the YA angle very well here. I felt, for the first time ever, that Spider-Man was actually of high school age and dealing with high school problems, as opposed to like other Spider-Mans who start in high school, but you can tell that they want to get to the age-appropriate, like college years or after as soon as possible. So I believed all that, except I have to compare this movie to the other Marvel movies that have come before this. And this felt more like a plot of one of the Netflix series, because the scale is not grand here. It's not dealing with apocalyptic scenarios, and that's kind of refreshing in a way.
Yeah, that's him. That's Spider-Man as a character. I mean, he's just the only reason he's a step above Luke Cage, Daredevil, on them is because he just happens to get involved in the Avengers battles.
I don't know. I'm really divided about this because I was entertained through most of the movie, but I wasn't invested in most of the movie. Just as if I watched a young adult movie, I think the third act really showed where this can go, and we'll discuss that in a bit. But for the first one, I'm like, oh, watching high school kids deal with high school problems and just happens to be Spider-Man. I don't know. It didn't grab me. It was okay. It was
so
good.
You feel like you were a little too old to be invested in.
Yes, and I think that's unfair for me to impart my life, my age onto it, but it is how I'm going to have to do it.
I mean, except for the Harry Potter films, the only thing that I ever like about the YA films, quote unquote, is my wife's commentary on it, because she'll sit there and so that always is entertaining. But I was telling Rich, because Rich and I went to see it together, is that I think anybody under 8th grade, 7th grade would not be uncomfortable during this movie. Because, like, first of all, like, the homecoming thing had an 80s theme, and that's when I went to high school. So,
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So, but like, to me, it's just like, you know, you have that double identity thing, which is always a hard one to.
He was having flashbacks the whole movie.
Yeah, and then you're sitting there. Well, I told him about, like, you know, my girlfriend at the time's dad was like in the FBI, so we'll get to that later on. But as far as being uncomfortable, I thought they really reminded me why I just try to blot high school out from my memory, because I'm like sitting here because it's like just one awkward situation after the other.
And that's what drew me in.
And it wasn't like Hollywooded up either, which again goes to, if you exclude Iron Fist, goes to the verisimilitude of the Netflix series, because the Netflix series always had me really invested, because I always felt they were really grounded, even when you had stuff like Kilgrave, who might have been a little more fantastic, so to speak. I felt that, and you just said it, because I felt that this movie was very grounded. And Rich and I were just having that conversation before we went into it, because everybody's talking about, to make it realistic, a lot of people, DC, has this idea that it has to be dark and brooding, but it doesn't. You have to have realistic characters, realistic situations, and we'll go with you to all these other fantastic places.
See, again, I'm going to imprint my age onto this. I don't believe, even though I thought it was good, I don't think this was aimed at my age group. When I look at even like the Avengers, at least Hawkeye is a kind of middle-aged dad. It's someone I could identify. There was almost no one aside from the villain who I could in a way identify with in this, and I think that is one of the major issues I have with this.
Not even their decathlon teacher.
He was in it for such a brief moment that, yes, it's true. But I wasn't invested in any of this, so that's where I'm going with it, and I'm unfortunately have to degrade it for that aspect. And it's not necessarily fair, but it's very fair to Spider-Man, because nothing in his life is fair.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I'm going to
yeah, exactly.
So,
well, I'm personally going to give it a 1. I was completely invested.
I mean, I was very invested. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I loved Vulture's Adrian Toome's backstory. Like, I felt for him. Like, his decision to go and basically become a villain, I was rooting for him to become a villain because of how fucked up his situation was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for them to come in, steal his jobs, jeopardize his family and all of his workers, and just, like, not even give a shit. Like, not even give him any compensation, which they could have.
Yeah.
I mean, they had the money to give him the compensation, and they chose not to.
it is corporate America, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for him to strike back in the way that he did, awesome.
Yeah. Louis?
Yeah, I mean, I was very invested. Prior to when we started this podcast, we were, asking, well, when does the intro start and the body begin? And I think that's kind of where I'm starting to lean towards maybe a 0, because the movie did have trouble getting footing kind of in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Like I guess it was investing. I was very invested. It was very entertaining. It was everything that I wanted in a Spider-Man movie. But if, structurally, I really was starting to break it down, I think That's probably the weakest point.
You read it, did
Although,
they did jump around a little bit.
Yeah.
I'll agree with you there.
The movie had me right away. I'm like, I was joking precast about Batman v Superman, about how they just prolong. I mean, like you've always got origin stories, and we all know that Uncle Ben dies and blah 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 blah. And it's like with Superman, or sorry, with Spider-Man and Batman, you know why they're orphans. You know the situation. We don't need to recap it. So what I loved about this origin story is that initially they focused on the quote unquote villain, who I kind of consider more of an anti-hero than a villain. And, I was really excited about that. And I thought it was really a great way to take it, especially when you got to Peter's, POV, him documenting everything. But if the nail in the one was when they had the Marvel crawl and the orchestral version of the cartoon for Spider-Man.
So you were just sold
I mean,
completely after that.
the thing is, it wasn't lip. How can I say it? There are certain times you do things like this, and it's a very fine line between, winking at the audience and putting you into the situation. And Michael Giacchino's soundtrack, and Steve-O, this is for you because we always discuss soundtracks. And we'll get to this with style. Michael Giacchino, who I think is one of the best composers in modern day, really integrated that really well, because when it's the crawl starts, you don't hear it right away. Then it kind of sinks in. And I said, this movie really is going to give us everything we need, but not wink at the audience at the same time. This is getting a very strong one. I loved it. Rich's arm that I kept hitting through the movie will prove it.
Got a fish-shaped bruise.
Yeah, you got. See, here's the Iron Fist. So
I already gave my thoughts on why I'm giving it a 0, and I am Louis. You're also giving it a 0.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna stick with 0.
Okay. So now we're on to the body with Rich.
All right, so we have Peter basically being put onto the path of these villains after they accidentally destroy his favorite deli, best deli in Queens. And he tries to tell Happy, or give Happy updates on these people, and he just wants nothing to do with him. Because I guess we forgot to mention that he's his point man for
His handler, I guess.
His handler as far as his superhero heroics go. So his best friend, Ned, happens to find out that he's Spider-Man because he failed a spot check on his way into his room. Involves him into his life. Has a battle within himself to decide whether or not he wants to use Spider-Man to help him get the most popular girl in school. During her house party, ends up being put onto ends up finding these villains again to get intercepted by Vulture, and now decides to go full force into trying to take them down. He finds a way to use his school decathlon team to help him get out of state in order to find their base. Along the way, unlocking his suit to get more abilities. Mm-hmm. And unlocking his suit to get more abilities.
Karen.
Yeah. Is introduced to Karen, the AI in his suit. He ends up saving his decathlon team when they're in trouble in Washington. Finds the... Actually, yeah, no, he doesn't find the base yet. But he finds out where their next weapons deal is going to be. So then he ends up trying to thwart them, screws up royally, only for Tony to come in and save his ass, who then takes his suit back because he feels that he's not responsible enough for his power. And then goes throughout, just starts focusing on school until finally he comes face to face with Vulture again, who turns out to be, surprise, his crush's father. And then has to decide whether or not to let it slide or be a hero and go after him. And of course, he decides to be a hero and go after him. And that's pretty much where the body ends.
For as original as people are claiming Spider-Man Homecoming to be, it really hits all of the origin points of Spider-Man. It deals with, instead of having Uncle Ben's death, they have him trying to save the day, almost killing however many people were on that ferry, and having to learn that with great power comes great responsibility. It's a lot of the... It's a remake. Like, throughout this, there are winks and nods, and there's direct remakes but subversions of the classic tale. But it's exactly plot for plot, which I'll get to in the antagonist, actually, which I have a very good one for. A plot for plot remake of all the Spider-Mans that have come before it. And
I can't disagree. But at the same time, I feel it was done in such a fresh way that it's easy to overlook that.
Easy for you to overlook that. I know. And again, all of my criticisms from the intro continue on here. Honestly, I can't remember. I was impressed by the conclusion, as I mentioned before, but I can't remember what happened when. And as you were recapping, you were did this happen before? It all kind of very fast-paced and blends together.
Because like you said, a good chunk of the movie, or a good chunk of the body, is his high school life.
Yeah.
I mean, there's superheroics interspersed throughout, but for the most part, it's a John Hughes high school movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then occasionally he'll hop off to throw on the costume and do some detective work, and then go right back to high school troubles.
But I also think in this universe where you have Thor and the Hulk, that I thought they captured it really well. Like I said, I was pretty uncomfortable I'm always get uncomfortable when you have like the dual identity thing. But I also felt it was, it captured that whole high school thing, especially when he finds out that, Vulture's
Liz's dad.
Is Liz's dad. Cause again, I was just like, oh my God, thank God he's not having dinner with him, because that would have been really uncomfortable.
Oh my God. I can just imagine that scene of like him cutting a steak.
Yeah.
Just like, so Peter, what are your plans after high school?
And I think we'll probably get to this with the conclusion, but the interesting thing was that, he saves Liz and his whole, decathlon team, but in a way he was responsible for it because he didn't know what he was dealing with. And like I said, it is going to,
that very same line is said by Vulture to him when he snatches his gun out of his hand during the ferry battle. He's like, kid, you have no idea what you're dealing with. And he's like trying to web it up as it's going, as the core overreacts.
And I guess we'll get to that later, but I do like the fact that, Vulture being a parrot never escapes, even when he's trying to tell Peter you're out of your league, even before he knows who he is. That paternal part of him, and we're going to get to this later, really comes through a lot. I thought it was a really great character study. I really have to say, it's always, these superhero movies are always going to hit certain points. I mean, Captain America's The Winter Soldier was unique in that it was more of an espionage film, and more of a political thriller, and it was probably the most grounded of the Marvel films. And this one, I felt that the same sense of realism with the characters of the situations, and I was invested the entire way. I knew Peter wasn't going to die, but I was really, his dual life really affected me. And I'm going to come out and say it, because I know Spider-Man 2 supposed to be the good one. I didn't like that. I haven't liked any Spider-Man up until now. And I always tell the joke that my wife and I knew it was true love because we thought Spider-Man 3 was awesome until our 6-month anniversary, until we couldn't get through 10 minutes of it. I mean, I watched the what's his name, the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and I'm like, these things are terrible. And because again, they're casting 20-something-year-olds to play high school students, and then they rush them off to college. And I never bought any of this crap for a second. Again, there was another situation where they always killed the villains, and I just felt that this was I felt these characters for the first time in a Spider-Man film were real.
Yeah.
So I'm giving it a 1. It was a very long-winded explanation, but why the movie had me through the whole time is because I felt these characters are real.
I think for me, at its core, the body had the perfect juxtaposition of Peter Parker and Spider-Man and high school and, anytime after that. And not just, and the way that they were able to jump back to Vulture. I liked how they did Happy.
The Peter who cried wolf. I mean,
Yes.
Happy was a great way to reflect that.
Yeah, it was. I think that's the fairy scene and after, for me, were some of the best parts of the movie, just because of how the characters carry themselves after. It was like, obviously, especially when Tony takes the suit back, and he says to him, as he had to learn himself, you're nothing. If you're nothing without this, you have to be something without the suit.
You could that and credit to Robert Downey Jr. That slight pause that he has before those words come out of his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
You could tell the lessons that he learned in Iron Man 3 are fresh in his mind.
Yeah.
It's like, if you really need the suit that badly, then retire. But it should not be here.
And Rich and I were talking about Iron Man 3 because we're both fans of Iron Man 3. I mean, it's one of my favorite Marvel movies because it was a deconstruction of Tony, and that's a perfect example of why that was important.
But you guys might have convinced me to give this a 1. Particularly, I enjoy, in a sense, the detective work that the Spider-Man had to. It's almost by accident that he finds about the Vulture. Mm-hmm. And the Vulture tries to course correct, and he accidentally kills the guy. And that's one of the things I like about the Vulture. He's not a monster.
Yeah.
He's, in a sense, a regular criminal who doesn't want any trouble to come his way.
I thought that was the anti-gravity gun. No, the anti-gravity gun's the one over there.
Yeah. But Peter Parker is so stubborn that when he gets the scent, he has to pursue it. And it's, again, almost by accident brings Vulture down. But
he was like, if he did not blow that car up, he would just went into the party and had a good time as Spider-Man.
Yeah. And the funny thing is I just realized this now, and maybe we touched upon it, is the thing in the where he almost kills his decathlon team was his fault. But the fairy was a bigger fuck up, and that was his fault. I mean, Tony did point it out to him, but I mean, Spider-Man, before he saves the day, really fucks things up, and it's his fault. These people, he saved them.
You can even go back to the ATM fight. That was his fuck up.
That's true.
Yeah.
Because he did not case the situation well enough to know what kind of weaponry they had.
Well, yeah, and he was completely inexperienced, so he went in there, messing around with things that he had no idea how powerful they were.
All right, so I'm going to give this a 1 now. You guys?
Yeah.
1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and just to clarify things, Spider-Man 3 was our first date. I didn't include that part in the story, which is definitely the worst. Oh no, that was pretty bad. Anyway,
that's a podcast for another time.
Fuck the other Spider-Man because they all sucked. This one was great.
So, on the conclusion now. We've already established that because of their car ride to the homecoming dance, Vulture now knows who Spider-Man is, and Spider-Man now knows who Vulture is. He warns him off, saying, if you stay in the dance with my daughter, everything will be peachy keen. Spider-Man can't. He fights the mini-boss, Shocker 2.
I love Bokeem.
It's actually I enjoyed that battle scene quite a bit. And then it turns out that the Vulture's next big score, he's going to retire after this, is to hit a plane that is transporting a bunch of artifacts from the Avengers to their new Avengers base in
upstate New York.
Yeah, upstate New York. So the Vulture, being a flight creature, ends up trying to use portal technology to get into the plane. Spider-Man clings onto the back with his webbing. And they have a pretty neat battle on top of the plane. It ends up crashing, and it ends up webbing up the Vulture and allowing him to get arrested, which is a nice change of pace from murdering someone.
Yeah, well, he saves him from the plane crash, and like during when when the explosion happened, I'm like, I hope to God that he's still alive, and they just carries him out. I'm like, thank you,
and
thank you.
And I'm so glad that the Vulture didn't appear out of the flames for the final confrontation.
Yeah.
Oh my
God!
God!
It was a very realistic
Seriously.
way it went down. And what I love about the Vulture, and we'll get more into this antagonist, is it's not like any other villain, motivation-wise, that we've seen in a Marvel movie. He's more Hans Gruber than he is like Ultron or anything. That is there to make money, and just happens to have a thorn in his side that's named Spider-Man.
But I mean, his motivation. Yeah, we'll get to it later with his motivation. But
Any thoughts on the conclusion?
I like the fact that they brought back the stealth technology from the Avengers. I thought it was cool.
Yeah. Forget that Aunt May finds out about his.
That was awesome.
Yeah, he gets brought to the new base and is asked to be an Avenger, which he thinks is a test.
That was awesome too, because I saw that suit and I'm like, oh fuck, don't do this already, Jesus.
Yeah.
And then he's just like, no, I want to go back to,
Stay grounded,
being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and getting rewarded with churros and so forth.
It's so much better than being rewarded with the Sokovia Accords.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
So
I'm giving it a 1.
I'm
Oh
definitely.
yeah,
definitely
without
a
question.
Any other thoughts on the conclusion?
Well, like I said earlier, precast, I love how realistically his relationship with Liz ended. Where it's just like, her life went to shit. She's still bitter about him ditching her at homecoming, and now she's moving to Oregon, and all she has to say to him is just, I hope whatever is going on with you, you figure it out eventually.
But that's realistic to
Exactly.
life. It's just like people move away.
That's why I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Liz also, she's supposed to be a very intelligent person. And she doesn't put 2 and 2 together ever in this entire
That's
thing.
exactly what I said to Rich.
Yeah, that is exactly what he said.
He basically gives up Peter to her dad, and she doesn't even put it together.
Yeah. But, no. Anyway, Chris, would you like to talk about themes?
Yes, and you brought it up. The theme of this film is, with great power comes great responsibility. And they did that really well. I have nothing else to add.
For me, I'd say this movie actually does more to the end of the phrase, which is with great power comes great responsibility and great sacrifice.
Well, I mean, the thing about great responsibility is what we talked about with the fact that his fuck-ups kept getting bigger and bigger, where he almost killed everybody on the... I mean, that is a responsibility lesson, which Tony then finally catches him on. He's just like, this was your fault. I need the suit back.
Here's the thing. It's not... I want to get to a couple other parts of the theme first before I go into Tony Stark. Because I actually like the development that Tony Stark goes through throughout this, or you seeing how the other movies had created the person you're watching right now. But first of all, you're dealing with a high school movie, a YA about growing up, all that kind of bullshit topics. But you also have a kind of a class warfare angle to it with Vulture versus Tony Stark in a way. And the fact that he's not attacking people, he's attacking the wealthy here. He's attacking what he feels is rightfully his that has been taken from him by the rich and powerful. But I also want to talk about, like, Tony Stark, because you mentioned about Iron Man 3 and how he learned positive lessons from that. But I also think that you also see that he's learned nothing from Civil War here. He's still using people. He used Spider-Man in Civil War.
Yeah, even though he said it's time for you to go home, Junior.
And then he dropped him. Yes.
What was the line that he said? He's like, people thought, after he goes off on him about the fairy thing, he's like, people call me crazy for bringing a 15-year-old, bringing a 14-year-old in. I'm 15. Stop it. It's like, zip it.
Yeah.
Not your time to talk. It's like, if we're bringing a 15-year-old into this battle.
He posited himself as a father figure to Peter Parker and then dropped him. And of course, it shows the irresponsibility of Tony Stark. And in fact, Peter Parker is a more responsible person in a way than Tony Stark is. And I'm interested to see how this plays out into Infinity War, because you see that Tony hasn't learned anything. Through his relationship with Happy in this, he uses Happy constantly. And he gets married to, or he proposes to Pepper Potts at the end of this. And the only reason he did was because he had called a press conference to introduce Spider-Man, didn't have a Spider-Man to present, so he decided that, we're getting married and we're going to use this as the
Happy's been carrying this
vehicle
ring around for 8 years.
since 2008.
What I find crazy is that Tony calls a press conference. That's easily a phone call you make first instead of driving all the way from Queens to upstate New York.
because he thinks he's smarter than. He
He felt
has
like he wasn't going to get turned down. He
Yeah.
even said
It's
he's like, "Are you turning me down?"
Yeah. Are you honestly turning me down right now?
Yeah.
Like that surprised me. I thought that he had a level of maturity beyond that now. And like you said, he's regressed a little bit. Do you think that maybe it's because of what happened in Civil War? Like he's falling back on some of his old.
That could very well be.
I think all the characters, well, not all the characters, but like, especially with Peter and Tony, like they were kind of mirrors of each other. They were trying to fill a hole that, like maybe Peter with, his parents or his uncle, and Tony with, he even mentions, like, I sound like my father now and everything, but he also lost Cap. He's lost friends. He's lost so many battles and everything.
Cap
maybe,
was,
like,
Cap was his moral ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's funny because with all you guys said, it's just like Peter's the beginning of the story. Tony's the end of the story. And somehow between the two of them, they're finding the middle. Mm-hmm. And that's really, I didn't think about that until you guys started talking about it. Yeah. So basically they're the beginning and ending of the same character and trying to find the good character between the two of them, or the balanced character between the two of them.
And it ends up their flaws keep them apart in a way at the very end, which doesn't bode well for the fate of humanity versus Thanos. But I'm going to give Themes a 1.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
Well, one thing I wanted to touch Themes also is like how this was a coming of age story, and like it's clearly it's one of the like top 5, if not top 3 things that Hollywood kind of pumps out in a lot of movies. But it was very interesting to see a Spider-Man movie done right in that sense. Mm-hmm. Whereas like he at the beginning of the movie he's 15, at the end of the movie he's 15. Like you mentioned before, like you were not jumping from high school right to college, and then we just are supposed to believe that they haven't aged at all in 5 years of but.
And especially since, like, in the other films, like, he's supposed to be in high school, even though, he's a 20, whoever, played, Peter Parker as a 20-something-year-old. I never got the sense that we were in high school. Mm-hmm. I never felt uncomfortable. I didn't really care about anybody. And I never felt like Peter was awkward enough. I never got a sense of, it's just like, yeah, Peter's awkward here, and they give you like 5 minutes of it. It's not a running theme throughout the movie that Peter's awkward and he goes to this technical school, which is also kind of hip. And I thought was cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he was awkward. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. Anyway, Louis, onto the antagonist of the year.
Do we do the scores for the?
Oh, we got all ones, right?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Antagonist Vulture was. Michael Keaton was awesome in pretty much every scene. Like we said, he's not maniacal. He wasn't, rampaging through streets trying to, cause massive destruction. He was trying to keep a low profile. He said, I think at one point one of his henchmen mentioned to him, he's like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" He's like, "Yeah, like." One of them say to him, like, yeah, FBI's involved. Like, we're on Tony Stark's radar. Like, it's time to get the hell out. Mm-hmm. And he's like, all right, well, finally at wit's end, he asked the guy for the
the vacuum air seal.
Yeah, the vacuum air seal. He's like, all right, fine. I was actually half expecting the guy to say, it's already done. Like, I was just waiting for the go ahead. He's been asking this whole time. He's just like, I'm just going to have it done just in case. But yeah, he accidentally kills someone. He's just trying to protect his family, like trying to take care of everybody that he was
willing to let him go. Like the base is like, you're fired, you're done, you're not getting it, you're not in this anymore. He's like, oh well, think of all the knowledge I had. It's like, you're right.
Disintegrates him.
Yeah, right then and there. And then he even thought it was a manslaughter at best.
Yeah, because he thought it was the anti-gravity gun. I guess he just wanted to fuck him up a little bit.
Yeah,
and a lot of that too. I think I should have mentioned it in Themes, but the blue collar versus white collar thing that kind of was underlying throughout the movie. He, Vulture says to Spider-Man at one point, he's like, they don't care about us. Like these are this is pretty much like corporate America. Well, the suits telling us like, no, you can't have any of this. Honestly, it kind of pissed me off too when they came in and they said, yeah, everything that you've taken out of here or if you've salvaged, you need to return that belongs to us. Like, no, honestly, who the hell are you to come in here and claim Chitauri alien technology as your own?
To begin with that, further to that point, at one point he goes, like, what you're I forget the exact line, it's like, you're criticizing me for selling weaponry? How do you think Tony Stark made
build his empire, yeah.
That's an incredibly, like, good point and one of the hypocrisies in America.
It's like I think everybody that has a problem with Tony Stark has brought that very fact up every single time.
Yeah, Avengers. With tell me how your family made their money again.
Yep.
With
you got
Nick
Fury. Yeah, you got Nick Fury. You have Hank Pym. You have Adrian Toomes. You have. I'm sure there's like one or two other people in there, but he constantly gets called out for it, and still just kind of sidesteps it.
But it's an important point. It's not like we're trying to beat this in. It's like, look, this isn't like lip service.
Actually, which makes it makes him even more of a villain because he did not care at all.
Yeah,
and before the Chitauri weaponry and all that other stuff, it was his weapon. It was Stark weaponry that was being on the black market, put around, and given to everybody else.
Ultron was his fault.
Yeah.
As you said so eloquently before, the Avengers versus Tony Stark's hubris. Yep. I mean, that was brilliant.
So 2 points. One is Tony Stark the antagonist of this?
I was going to say Shield was the antagonist because they fired. Was
that Shield? Or just is Damage Control a separate?
I think it's a subsidiary of
Tyne Daly was the antagonist.
So yes, Tyne Daly.
But still,
I couldn't remember her name. But like as soon as she walked in, I was like, "Oh, that sucks."
I don't remember if she's Cagney or Lacey.
There's no way you're going to talk her down from anything.
But that's crazy because that's another way showing how Tony Stark is profiting off of all of this.
Yeah, was like when they said it's like, "Oh, Tony Stark, Tony Stark." This is Tony Stark's subsidiary to clean up the. It's like, and who was it? Not Jackson Bryce, the second Shocker. He's just like, so the assholes who made this mess are profiting off of the cleanup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's another thing I love too with the Vulture is that they didn't have him go after Tony Stark until the very end. Like, he was like, you know what? When he had nothing else, he's like, all right, well, our shipment, he's like, this is it. This is it to retire. We're going to
one last score.
One last score, yeah.
But that's what makes
There's always one last one.
That's what makes him an interesting villain is that he's not some mustache twirling. It's not like I'm going to rid the world of the Avengers because they dropped the city on my wife. It's like he's like, I need to provide for my family because bureaucracy has made it impossible for me to provide for them. You took away a very lucrative job. His motivation is kind of understandable because you're like, yeah, I get you.
Okay,
like, and that's what makes. But that's what makes. And I've said this plenty of times before. That's what makes a villain for me.
Yeah.
If I find myself agreeing with you over the hero, then you've done your job.
I love me some Keaton. I want to preface this, but I mentioned before that there's a plot for plot issues I have with this Spider-Man. So I'm going to do the ones for the antagonist now. Who am I describing? He wears a green suit with a flying machine. He is the father of one of Peter Parker's friends. And he's an entrepreneur who got screwed over by the bureaucracy. Those are both describe the Vulture and the Green Goblin, except the difference is one was wealthy, one is not. Literally, the Vulture is the poor man's version of the Green Goblin.
The working class Green Goblin.
Yeah.
The blue collar Green Goblin.
But not the sociopath Green Goblin.
The
blue Goblin.
I'm gonna take the Green Goblin was fucking petty. He was a child.
Yeah.
Adrian Toomes had a valid reason to do what he did.
I think it's a much better character than the Green Goblin was. But I just want to say that. No, I just realized
it's a fair...
literally.
Yeah.
What really struck it to me was the conclusion when the Vulture is on the ground and he has his wings flying around, knocking the pillars over.
Oh, yes.
I'm like,
yep.
The Green Goblin, I believe, did that in a movie, or at least in a comic book.
Yeah.
Sam Raimi did it first.
Yeah.
Actually, now that you bring it up, I'm kind of thinking that whoever the asshole villain was in Iron Fist was more like the Green Goblin because he was petty. He was rich. He had a son.
There's just petty rich people or
Jesus
entrepreneurs
Christ.
everywhere.
Feel bad for
Yeah,
them.
yeah. Can you tell, Stan Lee and Marvel were struggling at the beginning?
But I have to say that this is actually one of my favorite Marvel villains that they've offered outside of the Netflix series.
I agree.
So I'm going to give this a very strong one.
I agree.
Yeah, one thing to also mention, he doesn't give up Peter at the end too.
Yes.
That was awesome.
He's like, there's definitely there's levels of respect that he has there that he shares the one time in the car, and then even like I guess when he gets all webbed up and gets arrested, like he has that grin. He's like, yeah, I did
He's
it.
like, he got me.
Yeah, he's like, oh, that right, he got me.
That's great.
Okay, Rich, let's talk about Peter Parker, the protagonist.
All right. So this is the first incarnation of Spider-Man that I felt they got perfect. Because for me, I'm talking from personal feelings here. You had Tobey Maguire, who was like a great Peter Parker, thought he was a shitty Spider-Man. Then you had Andrew Garfield, who was a fantastic Spider-Man, and felt he was kind of a shitty Peter Parker. And then you have Tom Holland, who just merges the two so well. Like, you believe that he's this, like, awkward, nerdy kid who's struggling to marry his social life and superheroics. And then you have, like, this sarcastic, good-hearted Spider-Man who's going out of his way to do the right thing while cracking a joke or two. And I love his character development throughout this whole movie. Like, he, time and time again, gets shown that he just does not have the experience yet to consider himself a legit superhero. Like, not even going into the fact of him wanting to join the Avengers, just in the fact of keeping people safe.
What I particularly like is the comparison they make on the ferry scene between Spider-Man and Iron Man.
Yes.
And, this is why Iron Man is not better, but, like, more experienced superhero than Spider-Man is. And to actually have that, like, comparison there really worked for the movie.
Yeah, especially how they play that scene out, where you have the tension build as he's just like, okay, Karen, give me a run, give me an x-ray of the ferry, give me all the strongest support points, misses one support, and even that probably wouldn't have, like, held the whole thing together, only for Tony to come in and solve the problem within 15 seconds. Mm-hmm. And then just, like, kind of give one of these, like, come meet me on the bridge so I can take your suit from you because you fucked up.
Young man, he took the keys away from the car.
Yeah.
Which is funny because they actually had a car scene where he trashes the car.
And, like, you see at the end him realize that he needs to spend more time on the ground to build himself up. And I loved it.
I have one other, I think, was one of the key moments in this to really sell me that he's Spider-Man. It's when he gets the date with Liz Allen, was it? Mm-hmm. To the homecoming dance. And he's happy and joyous. I'm like, Spider-Man can't be happy. Something terrible is going to happen. And it does. And it's like, yes, of course, you have to have a miserable life.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about Falcon being her dad was you knew he wasn't going to fuck up the dance to get to Peter.
Yeah.
Which is what happens a lot. And I was
it's like he's going back to the antagonist for a bit. He's first and foremost a good father.
Yeah.
Like, he loves his daughter, will do anything to make her happy. And even as soon as the second he finds out that Peter's Spider-Man, he's just like, hey, I'm going to talk to him for a little bit. He's like, hey, I don't want to fuck up your date because I don't want to make my daughter unhappy. Just don't follow me.
And I like how he caps off this conversation where he's holding he's holding a gun. He's just like, but go and have a good time, but not too much. Have fun, but not too much fun.
He never made it. I don't think Spider-Man was ever aware of it. Like, it just was there resting right by the, just in case, like, precautionary. You know, one of those things like...
And the funny thing is, I'm like sitting here going, Peter, just enjoy the dance. Peter, go take care of him. I'm rooting for Peter.
I wanted
him to have a good day.
I wanted the end of the movie to be like him dancing at Homecoming, only to pan out and see, like, Vulture riding off into the sunset with a fucking plate full of Tony Stark goodies.
Here's the interesting thing is, I want to bring up the comparison between Tony Stark and Peter Parker. Go back to that. I think that they're both very intelligent individuals, and they're both like sarcastic, and they're both, I think, in a way, awkward in their own ways. Although Tony Stark has that like front to him of being suave. The thing is, Peter Parker is earnest where Tony Stark isn't, and Tony Stark does the right thing because of guilt. And I know that Peter Parker does that as well, but I think he earnestly wants to do the right thing when he's not calculating the way Tony Stark is.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I really think this was a good choice to have the two of them. Like,
Because like whereas Tony, like you said, where he feels guilty guilted into doing the right thing. Peter can't help himself.
Mhm.
Like you could see him fighting, leaving Homecoming, and leaving Liz, and leaving this normal, happy life that he's been wanting even before he got the spider bite, and just like almost like tears in the back of his eyes, just like, I can't help myself. I have to leave and go do the right thing.
And I like how he says, "You deserve better."
Yeah.
And it's great because he's like, "You deserve better because of me and because of your dad. You deserve better."
Well, I think I love Tom Holland in this and the range that he was able to do, because for most of the movie, like you can see how immature, inexperienced Spider-Man was, and how that slowly changed to the end when he like turns down Tony. But for like obviously the iconic scene or the iconic image in the comics, when he's lifting all the rubble from his back, and that's kind of a turning point where like Peter, like I think in that comic, like, a loved one is obviously in distress, and like there's no one that can help him. He has to do it at his own wits. And in the movie, you see him struggling, like yelling for help, pleading for somebody to be there, but there's no one to be there.
And who could really help him remove that rubble except for a construction crew?
Yeah.
Seriously.
The irony.
And props to Tom Holland. Here's a British actor who not only does an American accent, but has a Queen's accent, as you guys pointed out in Civil War, which I didn't notice to the full extent. But in this one, I'm like, holy shit, he's amazing.
Also, that's another reason why he's like the best Spider-Man we had, because Garfield had a good Queen's accent. He had a decent Queen's accent. Holland brought not only a great Queen's accent, but an exaggerated Queen's accent for his video diary.
Yeah,
which he then brought back again when he ran into the decathlon friends.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was awesome.
So is that a 1 for everyone for
Oh,
Batman?
yeah, hands down.
All right, I'll go into supporting characters. I'm just going to name one and then pass it off to you. Fucking war criminal Captain America.
He did nothing wrong.
His PSAs were the best thing. Perhaps my favorite part of this movie, for perfectly honest. I loved every single time Captain America was in this movie. It was so good.
The after credit scene is my favorite after credit scene of probably anything ever.
So you're in detention.
The fact that he takes the time to flip the chair around to sit on it backwards like a square adult trying to rap with the kids. The only thing that would have made it better is if he had a backwards cap over top of his helmet.
It was so good. Anyway, I'll leave the rest of the sporting cast to you guys.
Oh, let's see. I was gonna pick Ned, but fuck it, I'll do Ned.
Ned is great.
Ned is fantastic. Like it's like a thin line for me on whether or not I'm going to enjoy somebody's like pretty much road buddy who like finds their secret and is like working behind the scenes. Peter, I think what made it work is Peter never treats him as anything less than his best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is very upfront about him with everything that happens. Like as soon as he finds out he's Spider-Man, he's just like, fuck it, I'll just tell him everything. Yeah. And like he trusts him with everything that he does. Like when he ditches him at the party, he immediately tells him what happened. Yeah. Ned's forgiving. He's like, "Oh my god, you almost died." Like that. I'm sorry for feeling mad about you leaving. Blah blah blah. And when Happy blows him off at the end, he becomes integral to both final battles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like he like follows. Like I'm assuming that as soon as Liz is just like Peter left, he's just like, all right, ran outside, just happened to find his web shooter, saved his ass against Shocker, and then ran tech support for him when he goes after the the Vulture. Almost said the Goblin. You're in my head. He goes after the Vulture, and I don't know. He's very, very good.
And the thing I like about this movie is because they're in a tech school, they're basically all nerds.
Yeah.
Which is really hip because it wasn't like because in all the other ones you've got Peter Parker against the jocks, which is like, all right, we've seen this before. Okay, you've got Peter Parker against the guys who want to be smarter than Peter Parker but aren't smarter, which I thought was an interesting dynamic. And then you've got MJ, who is amazing.
Yeah. Plus, I love how they established his computer skills without any reference being made to his computer skills. It was like Peter's just like, hey. Do you have your laptop? And he just like hacks the suit like immediately. It's like just hands him the suit and he's just like, hey, do this for me. And then like tells him to run be guy in the chair, and he's got like 2 computers running concurrently to give him any of the information he needs while tracking his phone.
And as sidekicks go, to bring the comparison back to Tony Stark and Spider-Man, it's interesting because Tony Stark treats Happy like basically a servant.
His valet.
Yep.
Yeah. And kind of Happy towards that role.
He even shames him a bunch of times. He's like, or Happy's just like, I can't screw up anymore. He's like, yeah, he used to be head of security, and now he's where he is now. Yeah. What do you think that is, Happy? Oh, I'm not going to mess up anymore, Tony. I'm not going to mess up anymore at all.
So I think that the comparison between how Spider-Man treats his right-hand man is very very neat. And Ned, again, is another earnest character that I actually rooted for the entire time. He wasn't insufferably annoying or anything like that.
And he wasn't the fat kid comic relief either.
Yeah, and like, as a fat kid growing up, it's nice to see this kid not be condensed to a joke.
Yep.
It would have been so easy for them to have him be like, especially with the whole thing with the hat, where like I was waiting for that to be like a joke against his character, and it's not. Never.
Nice hat.
It's like, hey, nice hat. And it's like, and he wears it again for Homecoming. It's like, hey, he's rocking the hell out of that hat.
And no. I was you said everything perfectly. I thought he was a great character.
I guess a secondary antagonist, to go back to that, but a supporting character really is Flash. And I thought he was very interesting. And there's just one scene I like to point out about him that says all about his character. They get the group trophy for the decathlon. And as the elevator's crashing, he runs ahead, pushes everyone else out of the way, puts the trophy up first, saying, "Save my trophy." And then putting that trophy before even his own life says everything you need to about that character. And
it's not even that he just puts it ahead of his own life. Yeah. It's that he still puts his life above everybody else's.
Yeah.
So the trophy's like more important than everybody.
And that was the other awesome thing is because like in the past with this, but I don't know, I didn't really watch the entire Andrew Garfield film, but I remember like in the old with the what's his name,
Tobey
Maguire. It's just like once he gets the superpower, he has to kind of best the jocks, but keep it hidden from him. Peter Parker is smarter than this idiot with the Flash, but he never ever gets a chance to like, except for like, for the trials to prove that he is smarter. He never becomes the hero of the I mean, it's not like he foiled the enemy plan and made it in time to win the trophy.
No, his moment came earlier in the movie.
Yeah, away.
When they're in class and Flash answers, and then the teacher calls on Peter, who's clearly not paying attention, just watching YouTube videos. It's like, gives the right answer and just goes back to what he's doing.
And he's watching himself.
Yeah.
But the other thing I thought was cool is the only reason he joined the team again was because he had to go to Washington to foil this crime.
Yeah.
He really didn't care about this, which I thought was awesome.
So anyone have any other secondary they'd like to point out?
Well, aside from MJ, who I thought was awesome, giving everybody the finger, like, where she's just like, Peter, what are you hiding? I really don't care. Go. I'm so glad they made Aunt May not an older lady because when she drops him off at the house party, she's like, there's no judgment. She goes, I remember house parties. And, where she's talking to him at the Thai restaurant, it makes it so much more relatable because I'm so sick of these like out of touch when you're trying to keep in
that never made any sense for me to begin with. It's his Aunt May. It's not his great Aunt May. It's his Aunt May. Why the fuck is she in her 70s when his mom had to have been like, I don't know, maybe she'd be in, maybe his mom would be in like her 50s by the time he's in 50s, 60s.
I mean, you know, with great aunts, like I call my aunt and uncle by the first name, but like my great aunts would always be like aunt. Well, I don't know, but so that in a way made sense, but it just was like, who cares? Like I'm tired of that dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, for me, everybody on screen kind of breathed life into this movie. It was awesome seeing how like the interactions with Liz and Peter, MJ, with the gang, the parts of the decathlon. The Steve PSAs or the Captain America PSAs. Hannibal Buress also was like really fun.
Stay till the ending credits. Don't just stay till the ending credits.
Stay till after the mid-credits scene too.
It was
because we ran into somebody outside who like hadn't seen that last Captain America PSA.
You have to see the last bit.
So yeah, for me, it's definitely a 1.
Yeah, same here.
Okay, and on to dialogue with Chris.
My thing in a movie is it doesn't really need quotable lines. I need the dialogue to be very naturalistic. I need to believe I'm in there, as we discussed with Jaws. And this one, as if I had made clear, I felt like, because like when Peter was like, even when Peter was just like, hey, hand me your laptop because he wants to hand it, you know, hack the suit. I'm like, no, Peter, don't do that. Don't get in trouble, you know. And I felt that, you know, the dialogue really helped just, you know, be part of that natural thing. It didn't feel like adult writers wrote this movie about, you know, who were like really out of touch. But on top of that, you also had like amazing lines where he's, you know, like Tony, as we said before, and it got me in the trailers where it's just like, if you need the suit, I mean, if you're nothing without the suit, then that's more reason not to have the suit or whatever the line was. So it had this amazingly naturalistic dialogue where I didn't notice the dialogue. But it also had some really great quotable lines in it. And, you know, MJ, every time she gave the finger was amazing. So
it was just the one time.
In high school, my friend flipped me off, and it was the greatest, you know. So, I mean, that's a real art to give somebody the finger. You know, it's like using profanity. I'm a big proponent of profanity, but, you know, you just
Plus,
can't
it was
use
like, it was the fact that she waved first, and smiled, and then just like,
just so the iTunes audience knows.
Oh, sorry.
Chris has given the middle finger like 30 times so far of this podcast. So, go on.
No.
He's trying to curse for the deaf.
Yeah, sorry. I've been like, every time I mention MJ, I've been giving these guys the finger. I'm doing it right now.
Yeah.
That sounded really bad. There's no way to say that without it.
Anyway. I don't think it's real dialogue. I think it's John Hughes' like clever reality.
Can you have real dialogue in a movie though? Nope. Just answer my own question.
Yes.
But I mean, the thing is, that's why I said naturalistic as opposed to realistic, because there is always going to be that separation. There's always going to be that, you know, uncanny valley, let's say. But I mean, I felt, you know, a dialogue has to be naturalistic.
Yes. No, I think they did well. It felt like a movie high school type thing. So
I felt it more realistic or naturalistic than a John Hughes film, to be honest with you.
Fair enough. So I'm giving it a 1.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and Louis on the style.
So this style was amazing.
Pun intended.
Friendly.
Are you sure it wasn't the ultimate?
But no, from the very beginning, we mentioned it briefly, you know, the orchestral 60s Spider-Man theme just completely gave me goosebumps. And everything that they incorporated into it was amazing. Like, the soundtrack was amazing. It really didn't, you know, oversaturate the scene. Sometimes, like, it kind of especially Suicide Squad, mainly at you. Songs overstay their welcome or are not welcome at all.
They weren't. Oh,
and
damn it.
Everything, like the color palette of this movie, it reminded me a lot of the first Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire. And that movie visually is beautiful. Everything besides that is up to debate. But this one, it was phenomenally, I guess, thought of, because exactly what you would expect. Nothing was too dark, like especially in the scenes at night. Everything was kind of. It seemed like there was ambient light somewhere. It wasn't
True.
It wasn't
Very
too.
true.
Yeah, nothing seemed way. Even when he was in the rubble, like nothing was like very. There wasn't like really dark shadow, like casting shadows or anything like that. That made it anything more brooding. But I say for me, like there's not many shots in particularly that I did like. Like I always like to look at cinematography, but there was at least one sequence that I loved, and it was when he was running through all the lawns. And it's just like Ferris Bueller. Yeah, they even have an homage to Ferris Bueller, but they show you how side to side they are completely two different characters. Like Spider-Man is inexperienced in everything he is. He's laying waste. He's destroying sheds. He's just like crashing people's pool parties. He's like terrorizing dinners. And as you see, like Ferris Bueller, like almost obviously like just coordinated enough and everything. Like he avoids everything. He's very suave and everything. But no, Spider-Man is just running chaos.
Did we say it precast or was it in this cast where somebody said like, it proves why Spider-Man's better in the city than he is?
So that precast.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
And like to add on to that for style, I love how reality ensued for everything. Yeah. Like you see, like when he gets stuck out in the suburbs, he can't get around nearly as fast as he does when he's around buildings. And to the point where he's stuck on a golf course, tries to fire his webbing, and just has to hoof it.
Yeah, that wide
across
that wide shot. Yeah,
that wide shot of him. He's like, "This sucks."
Which is also a cool callback because Ned was just like, "How far can you shoot that?"
Oh
thing?
yeah.
Because so he does that, and it just goes.
But the thing is, if you want to deal with comedy, they do, in a sense, a lot of like set up the comedic scenes that will follow, and a lot of other aspects to like, even if you're doing plot wise with the portal they're going to use on the plane. I forget what it's called. But that's a good brick joke they have.
The first time they ever showed it was Tinkerer grabbing a beer from the fridge.
Yeah.
That was the first time they ever showed that tech, which I loved.
Louis,
and also how easy it was for it to be shaken loose.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
To like give Spider-Man his knockout concussion that landed him in damage control.
Yeah. That's a good point. But Louis, I agree with almost everything you said except for the fact that I felt that the plane fight at the end fell into darkness quite a bit. And there are a lot of fast-paced things going on, which I was perhaps supposed to lose like a little bit of where characters were because they're fighting on the top of a moving plane. But I don't know, I felt that perhaps that could have been lit better. If I'm going to have one complaint about style, it's that one thing there. But it doesn't detract from the rest of the movie, which I think is the most comic book movie I've actually, like, it felt like I was watching what their intended Spider-Man comic was supposed to be. So
agreed. And, I agree with the style's getting one for me, but, I mentioned it before and Louis mentioned it and Steve, this is for you again. The music, again, Michael Giacchino, his music was phenomenal in this. I even said to Rich, this is another Giacchino soundtrack I'm going to buy. Just perfect all around.
All right, so one's all around?
Yeah. One. Yeah.
All right, Rich, on to recommendation for you.
Most definitely. If you enjoy Spider-Man, if you enjoy the Marvel movies, if you enjoy movies in general, I would recommend this hands down. I think that many people can get a lot out of it. I mean, it's got enough humor, it's got enough character development, it's got enough good music to really give anybody enjoyment.
I'm also going to recommend it with a couple of caveats. I think this is definitely intended for a younger audience. I think that's their main focus. I could see people who are casual fans of Marvel movies or like taking their kids to go see this, not enjoying it as much as others, but I think the villain is strong enough and Tom Holland's performance is well enough that it's an enjoyable flick. So I'm going to give it a recommendation.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to recommend it. It's a great film. I mean, if you put Captain America, the Winter Soldier on one end of the Marvel spectrum, and I'm just talking about Marvel, about like what you call about gritty realism without being like dark and brooding. This is the most colorful, or let's just say instead of realism, naturalism. I think this is, to me, this and Winter Soldier are the high watermarks of the Marvel universe. And as far as comic book movies go, I mean, it's a damn good movie all around. I highly recommend it. I think that's about it. I mean, I could probably go on and on about this movie.
Really?
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. I know, bias aside, I would say, and going off what Ian said, it's definitely for a younger audience, but easily for older audiences. There's definitely things in there that you can get out of it. You can enjoy the humor. Some of the subtle jokes that they make, they're very mature. Is it inspiring? No. It's a comic book movie. It's entertaining. It's, what you want when you have sitting down with popcorn and all that. But it's not award winning. But if you are a comic book fan, you can obviously, as much as Logan was a Wolverine X-Men movie or X-Men like story that, you could easily see in comics, this is a Spider-Man story.
And the funny thing is, before coming here to the podcast, I was really excited about doing this podcast, but there's a part of my little brain that had to keep telling my brain, like, no, you're not going to see it again. Because I really want to see this again. I'm excited. I will see this as many times as I can in the theater. Definitely the first thing, as soon I'm going to pre-order it. But to be honest with you, I was so excited to talk about it. Part of my brain had to remind, no, we're going to talk about it. We're not going to go see it again.
I'll give the scores now. So, Rich and Chris gave it a 10, and Louie and I gave it a 9, giving an overall score of a 9.5, which I think is right up there where Rotten Tomatoes is. I think 92.
Yeah, they had 90,
Yeah.
93 or 94.
So anyway, I'm Jonathan E. Manser with Rich Perry.
Rest in peace, Joan Lee.
Rest in peace, Joan Lee. Nice.
Rest in peace. Sorry.
I don't mean to interrupt your Louis Durant.
Have a good one. Rest in peace, Joan Lee.
And Chris Morgan.
Yeah, that was unfortunate that she died the same day, but rest in peace, Joan Lee. And with great... Whatever. Go on.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manser. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.